to go ahead and call this special assembly meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Present.
Mr. Dyson. Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Came right in the door. Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Salatel. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Honest, can you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, move.
Mr. Chair, it sounds like the phone is set up, and so we need to know who's on the phone if we go into executive session.
Sure. Can anyone identify themselves if they're on the phone, please? Do we have anyone on the phone?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recommend disconnecting it if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, if I might make a motion to change the order of the day, I think we could dispatch the second item very quickly and not keep the attorney hanging up.
So you'd like to take up item 4B before 4A?
Yes.
You can make that motion.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that?
And just so everyone, on the motion, sorry.
Sure. Yeah. Motion. Did you have any thoughts, Mr. Dunbar, on the motion? Oh, yes. We've been joined by Ms. Salatel. Okay, seeing none, then we'll go ahead and change the order very quickly. So we'll go ahead and take up item 4B, resolution number AR 2019-286, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly regarding the requirement to cease operations for municipal marijuana cultivation license number M10142 Farmer Jacks, LLC DBA Farmer Jacks. Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Constant, do you want to speak to it?
Yep. This is really straightforward. If you look at lines 35 and 36 on the first page of the resolution in your packet, that really cuts the meat. Marijuana cultivation facilities are unique and their product is living and subject to damage or death if continued care is not allowed. And we crossed this bridge with the Cannabis and Elasticsense when we had that conversation. What the effect of this resolution will do is to allow, it will direct the staff that it shall not operate, does not include killing all the plants arbitrarily, that it will give him 30 days to continue the growing of the plants while he goes through the process to get his license. That's it. And what the intent is to do at some point in the not too distant future with Mr. Gates is to encode that for the purposes of cultivation facilities, if they're shut down, they can continue to grow the plants that they have, not plant new plants until the final determination is made on the status of their license.
Thank you. Ms. Salatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a process in place then if they have live plants at the end through either state or, I know we've talked about the CEDC, there's something that will deal with this live material so that we make sure it's properly disposed of?
Yes, it's all managed through metric, and the state has their rules when a license is ended, how they dispatch the product.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton, then Ms. LaFrance.
I thought this was already part of the process, so I mean, if they said that, so is that only on the state side? It is addressed somewhere.
That we allow them to continue to grow.
Well, to protect their merchandise.
Yeah, I'm going to turn to Ms. Jones.
It is my understanding that that is the case if the applicant submits a timely municipal renewal application, and I believe the date is June 30th. And as you can see in the first few whereases, this applicant didn't do so.
Right, no, I'm a separate issue, actually,
Okay.
understanding that.
Okay.
My understanding is that if they're told to stop operating, that there are provisions for dealing with their inventory, so it did
Right.
not include, I mean, this is already automatic, I thought.
Not for our license.
Yeah, so through the chair, the state has provisions for that. We do not. We addressed it only with Elasticsense in a specific AR. So this is doing the similar process for this operator.
Okay. Are you familiar with this operation then? And they intend to continue and they just goofed up?
It's kind of a long story. He's a lone operator, been doing this by the bootstraps, with very little money, and struggling at every turn. So yes, he's continuing and trying to do everything he can to get all the paperwork and the building stuff done. I don't want to go into too much detail. I haven't talked to him since the message came across that his license was being done this process with because of the ex parte rules. But so I haven't spoken with him about his plans since a couple weeks ago.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So Hillside Family Medicine, that's not a grow operation, but they'll have similar inventory issues.
Through the chair, the understanding is with retail and manufacturing and testing facilities, their product is shelf stable. They don't have the same process for keeping their plants alive and watered. And so that was the thought process behind those two not being a part of an AR like this.
Some of it, they still have product that you address. Okay, so you're not allowed to operate, but you have all this marijuana product. What do they do with it? They're not allowed to sell it. Not allowed to really have it now.
They're allowed to have it on the premises. Code allows the provision of code that tells the facility must cease operations. It also allows for them to retain possession of their product. So typically, the manufacturing facilities have dried bulk that they either have purchased from a cultivation, or if they have their own cultivation, they transfer it over. So it would be shelf stable.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Gomes?
Just briefly on that, when we come to the question of addressing the code change that would allow for this, the intent is to ask the industry if there are other subsegments of the market that have a shelf stability issue, and then we may incorporate them into that conversation. But at this point, the only obvious one is the plants will die if they aren't watered and the lights aren't on and off and someone isn't there. So narrowly cabin this resolution. The folks at the other two that are under this condition don't have products growing. It's not it's not cultivation. So,
Well, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds, glad you did this. This be done. But we need to also think, I mean, so if they're, even if they have shelf stable, what do they do with it? I'm shutting down.
the state
They don't
rules
meet
that.
their requirement. Do we have some interim thing so you can no longer operate, but you can liquidate your merchandise, your product or something? There needs to be some intermediary step.
Thank you, Mr. Conson. Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And do we need to create, code or something that allow them to sell it back to a wholesaler? Because then the wholesaler could redistribute it to another retailer. It's just a thought that came to my mind.
Yeah, Ms. Thomas.
Through the chair, for the resale, the state prohibits that. If they don't have a license, if they don't comply with local requirements, then they aren't in compliance and they would not have a state license, and therefore they're not able to use metrics, so they cannot resell any of their items. And then, what was there was a previous question that was dealing with something Mr. Littleton was going to ask.
I think it's the same question. How do we manage the products in the licensee?
Oh, yes. So my understanding through code enforcement, they work with the state enforcement, and they would go in and confiscate all of the product if it was shut down completely, and they deal with it on their end. So state and city work together for those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton?
I'm just looking at this, I wonder if an amendment, I can make clear they can't sell. They can store, maintain, and care for marijuana.
Isn't it just a cultivation license?
Right.
They would sell.
No, and that's, I think that is, if I mind, I think that's implicit in the fact that the only thing that they're allowed to do is continue keeping their plants alive. And shall not operate is a narrow exception, only reasonable and necessary actions for minimal maintenance of marijuana. So,
Good.
new marijuana, you can't plant new plants, you can't do anything other than maintain the plants you have.
I move to amend that.
Is there a second?
Second.
We haven't heard my
Could you?
amendment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll second him anyway.
On page 2, line 8. Just add the word only. Licensee reference herein may continue to only store, maintain, and care for marijuana plants. Does that work? Or
Maybe-
only two, maybe
maybe-
it should be before the.
Maybe only, or in front of continue. How about?
May only continue, that makes better.
Yes, Mr. Gates.
Thank you. So I wanted to say I don't think the amendment's necessary. I helped draft this, and on page 2, line 3, we have a citation to the code, 1080.36. I'm sorry, line 5, 1080.405A1 and 4. And those are, that section is the marijuana cultivation facility, privileges and prohibited acts. In subsection A allows the cultivation facility to do a number of things, 1 through 7. Number 2 is to sell. Number 3 is to provide samples. Number 5 is to transport marijuana. Number 6 is to conduct in-house testing. And number 7 is to provide samples to a retail store or product manufacturer. Those are prohibited because the only things that are allowed are A1, propagate, cultivate, harvest, prepare, cure, package, store, and label. They would be allowed to do that except for propagate because at the end of line 5 and 6, except they can't propagate seeds and cuttings. Number 4 is to store inventory on the premises. So those are the only two things that would be allowed. That's why I inserted those code citations here. So I think that it's kind of clear if you read the code section, what they are allowed to sell and so forth.
Do you rescind your amendment?
Well, somewhat clear, but we got a guy who didn't know he had to renew his license. We got to make this crystal clear. My guess is if you went to him and say, you know, you got to follow 1080.0405A 1 through 4, he'll be like us and go, okay. Just make it overt.
Ms. LaFrance.
Just a quick question then to Mr. Gates. Does adding the only have any negative consequence?
That'd be fine.
It's only twice in that sense.
Okay, I'll remove the amendment, but please make sure he knows he can't
Where's
sell
the
it.
choice?
Sorry, it's in the second word.
Okay. All right, I'll withdraw.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr.
Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So does this mean, though, in terms of the normal maintaining and care that they can harvest at this time? Because obviously they might be right in the middle of a harvest next week. So what is included in that idea of maintaining and caring? That is included, harvesting is included.
I'm seeing
Because it
that.
says that you can't cut or clone or propagate. Anyway, I guess to me that might be a little confusing, but, so they can still harvest.
So if I might just sum up, the whole intent here is just allow him not to kill the plants that he has while he goes through the steps that he needs to get this done. It's not to create an opportunity for him to do anything shady. He knows. I assure you, if he doesn't know, he won't. And so this is a simple act of compassion on us to a business to allow them to not have a total loss in the process of getting their paperwork.
But yes, you could harvest.
Harvesting, if a plant isn't harvested on time, it either dies or becomes unsellable.
Can I just add something? I think, Crystal, when it says seeds, cuttings, or clones, and they're talking about propagation, that the cutting is like, I think, cutting a little thing and then making a new plant, so that would be distinguished from harvesting the big plant, right?
Mr. Gates.
I think it helps put this in context of time. There's only 30 days where they can do this, and that's in section 3 of the resolution. And there's also the renewal application process at some point. It's probably within 30 days to take action. Renew it, working out renewal. If it's denied, they can't do anything. They got that down. But if you grant it, then they can just return to normal operation. So this is very temporary.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
So maybe for Mr. Gates too. So we're providing basically a 30-day grace period for anybody that's cultivating and allows them to maintain their plants. But if somebody had a retail shop and they did the same thing, would they get a 30-day grace period as well? Because it seems to me we need to, if we're going to allow it for part of the industry, then maybe we need to do the same for any other aspect of the industry. No.
So if I might, Mr. Chair, this is only specific to this license at this time, and we'll come back to a general question allowing change. We'll do that thoughtfully and methodically in the fullness of time with public hearings and everything. And so this is just specifically to this license at this time. And there's a special concern with growing things that if you are not allowed to maintain them, they will die and become nothing, whereas a shelf-stable product on a counter in a jar isn't going to lose its ability to be part of the market. And so this is just very narrowly cabined around the idea of the growing and dying cycle of the plant.
Okay, if I may, but my comment though was just in regards to the fact that we're creating a 30-day grace period, regardless of what they were actually doing. I mean, I understand the specific circumstances for this particular company, but at the same time, there could be others that would like to see a same 30-day grace period because they didn't get their license application in at the same time, or at the right time.
I think that would be Barbara's concern, and it's a good concern. Well, just that we create precedent and that there's a standard that we have to be flexible when someone makes a mistake. And so I think that's why we'll address it in the code when we get there.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance.
Yes.
Mr. Constant.
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Mr. Dyson.
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
Ms. Zolotone.
Yes.
The motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So moving on our agenda, we are now at item 4A, legal update. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Wood Pearson to walk us through the process and the motion we were going to make to go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So pursuant to AMC 230-035B1A, the Assembly may recess to meet in executive session to discuss a specific legal matter, including pending litigation. We have, as a matter of practice, always given pending litigation updates on pending litigation in executive session in order to share full updates on strategy and status, which should not be shared publicly because litigation remains ongoing. All information shared and gleaned in the session is confidential. No official action may be taken in executive session except to give direction to an attorney or to a labor negotiator regarding a specific legal matter or pending labor negotiation. The session will be taped. Tapes will be available to members of the body only and may be discussed only in further executive sessions. I want to reiterate that things that are discussed here are confidential and should only be discussed between members in a future executive session, even if you're both present here in this session. The tapes become public at a date certain set by the Assembly at the conclusion of the executive session. I will set the foundation for a second motion after we come out of executive session that will specify how long those tapes will remain confidential. Any member who needs to leave during the session is free to leave, but may only be updated on the contents of the executive session in a future executive session or via review of the tapes of the session. Employees and staff members that the body determines are necessary to the conversation may remain in the meeting during executive session. Most of the members of the audience right now are members of our civil legal team, who I would ask that are clearly allowed to remain because they will be delivering the updates today. But the chair may also determine that other staff or employees may be permitted to remain in the room. The new ethics code states that no public servant shall use, disclose, or release confidential or non-public information gained through the person's municipal position unless authorized by law or by order of the court. Any violation, any disclosure would be referred to the Board of Ethics. The code provides that the board may make recommendations for corrective action. Additionally, the municipality may pursue a civil action against an official where the release of confidential information adversely affects the outcome of litigation or negotiations or leads to increased financial liability.
Such a disclosure could also subject a member of this body to a recall election. Pursuant to state statute, the grounds for recall include misconduct in office, incompetence, or failure to perform prescribed duties, one of which is maintaining the confidentiality of confidential information. The code does not specifically provide for the collection and destruction of notes taken at executive session, nor does Robert's Rules of Order. This was past municipal practice. So if today you are taking notes and you would like me to collect those and destroy those at the end of executive session, I'm happy to. That said, if you would like to retain those notes, I'm fine for you to retain those notes as well. I would just remind you that the notes themselves contain confidential information, and that failure to properly preserve the confidentiality of your notes from today's session could implicate all the same consequences that I've just outlined. With that, I would say the municipal attorney's office today seeks to apprise the assembly of the status of pending litigation matters, and I would seek a motion from the body to move into executive session to discuss those matters.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. McPherson, would it be appropriate for me to ask all the staff that are going to be remaining in executive session to take their names on record?
Certainly, yes.
If we can do that then.
The whole crew, so I guess we'll have, let me start with Quincy. So basically everyone in the audience, except for Alex, you can decide whether Alex is necessary or not. But everybody, and Ona. But everybody else is a municipal attorney. Quincy, you want to start by identifying yourself and we'll go through the...
Yeah, just your name.
In name and, that you're an assistant municipal attorney.
Okay, Quincy Arns, assistant municipal attorney.
Brian Sewell, assistant municipal attorney.
Megan Carmichael, assistant municipal attorney.
Blair Christensen, assistant municipal attorney. Pamela Weiss, assistant municipal attorney. Ruth Bobstein, assistant municipal attorney.
DNSW, municipal attorney.
Todd Sherwood, assistant municipal attorney.
Ona Browse, chief of staff to Mayor Berkowitz.
Jessica Willoughby, assistant municipal attorney.
Yeah.
Barbara Jones, municipal clerk.
Nancy August, clerk's office.
Yes. Yeah.
Gina Ashman and Colleen Peterson, interpreters.
Dean Gates, assistant counsel.
And Becky McPherson, municipal attorney.
Okay, great. So those are all the staff that are going to be remaining in executive session. If we can go ahead and take a vote. Do you want to go ahead and do a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Constant.
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Mr. Weissman.
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
Ms. Zalatel.
Yes.
The motion passes 10-0.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and go into executive session. Thank you.